The 3 days to get out of my own house. My name is Harold Mitchell, and I'm 68 years old. I've lived in this Denver suburb home for 32 years, raised my son David here, and watched my wife Margaret take her last breath in our bedroom just 6 months ago. But according to my daughter-in-law Sarah, none of that matters anymore. Because apparently David is dead too. Except here's the thing, I just saw him post a vacation selfie from Nassau yesterday. Sarah thought she had me figured out. Grieving widower, confused old man, a easy target for her inheritance scheme. She staged an entire funeral, collected donations from our neighbors, and demanded I sign over my $2.3 million retirement fund. What she didn't know is that I spent 30 years as a forensic accountant for the FBI, and I've been recording every conversation we've had for the past 3 months. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This is the story of how I brought down the most elaborate fraud I've ever seen, and why you should never underestimate a grieving father. Let me take you back to where this all started. March 15th, 2024, the day Margaret lost her battle with pancreatic cancer. We'd been married 43 years. The medical bills had already eaten through $180,000 of our savings, but I didn't care about the money. I would have spent every penny twice over to have one more day with her. The house felt like a tomb after the funeral. David flew in from Miami for the service, brought Sarah with him. They'd been married 3 years, but I barely knew her. Real estate agent, always checking her phone, always talking about market opportunities. "Harold, you can't stay in this big house all alone," she said, standing in my kitchen that first week. "It's not healthy." I was washing Margaret's coffee mug, the blue ceramic one with the chip on the handle that she refused to throw away. "I'm managing fine." "Are you?" Sarah picked up a stack of mail from the counter. "Because I noticed some of these bills haven't been opened." That should have been my first red flag. How did she notice my mail? But I was drowning in grief. Everything felt overwhelming. The insurance claims, the medical bills, the sympathy cards that kept arriving. Sarah offered to help organize things, said it was what family does. "I'll just sort through these for you," she said, taking the mail to the dining room. "Make sure nothing important gets missed." I nodded. Seemed reasonable. Margaret always handled our finances anyway. What harm could it do? That night, I found Sarah photographing documents in Margaret's old office. Bank statements, investment portfolios, life insurance papers. "Just making sure everything's organized," she explained. "You have quite a bit here, Harold. It's important to keep track." She was right about one thing. I did have quite a bit. And she was definitely keeping track. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's visits became routine. Always helpful, always concerned. "Harold, you seemed confused yesterday when I asked about your bank account number," she'd say. "Maybe we should write these things down somewhere safe." Or, "You told me the same story twice about Margaret's garden. Have you talked to a doctor about memory issues?" Little comments, gentle suggestions, each one chipping away at my confidence. She started bringing up senior living communities. "Beautiful facilities, Harold. 3 meals a day, activities, medical staff on site. Much safer than living alone." I'd find her in Margaret's office again, going through files. "Just making sure all your important documents are in one place," she'd explain, "in case something happens." What really bothered me was how she talked about David. Always vague references to his struggles and financial stress. But whenever I asked to speak with him directly, there was always an excuse. "He's dealing with a lot right now, Harold. Work pressure. He doesn't want to burden you with his problems." Then I started noticing other things. Credit card statements I hadn't ordered arriving in my mailbox. Calls from financial advisors I'd never contacted. Sarah always had explanations. "I thought it was time to review your investment strategy. At your age, you need to be more conservative." One morning in June, I found a power of attorney document on my kitchen table. Sarah was making coffee like she lived here. "Just a precaution," she said, not looking up. "If something happens to you, someone needs to be able to handle your affairs. David's too busy and I have experience with real estate transactions." The document gave her complete control over my finances. Every account, every investment, every decision. I stared at that paper and realized I had no idea what else Sarah had been doing while I was grieving. But she was about to find out that I wasn't as confused as she thought. That night, I did something I should have done months earlier. I pulled out every financial document I owned and spread them across Margaret's old desk. The numbers were staggering, even to me. $2.3 million in my Fidelity retirement account, another $45,000 in a Wells Fargo savings account. The house, recently appraised at $890,000. Margaret's life insurance payout of $250,000 that I hadn't touched. Nearly $4 million total. But here's what made my blood run cold. Some of those documents had notes in Sarah's handwriting. Account numbers, balances, even contact information for my financial advisors. She knew exactly what I was worth down to the penny. I started thinking about all those helpful conversations. How she'd steered our talks toward my finances. How she'd volunteered to organize my papers. How she'd suggested I might need professional management of my money. Margaret had always handled our investments. She was the smart one with numbers. After she died, I'd been letting everything sit untouched, too overwhelmed to deal with it. Sarah knew that. She'd been counting on it. The next morning, she brought me coffee and a fresh copy of that power of attorney document. I had my lawyer review this, she said. He made a few adjustments to make sure you're properly protected. I scanned the new version. The adjustments gave her even broader powers. Authority to sell property, make investment decisions, access safe deposit boxes. Sarah, I need to think about this. Her smile faltered for just a second. Of course. But Harold, at your age, these decisions get harder every day. And David really is struggling financially. He needs family support. There it was again. David's mysterious financial problems. Problems that apparently required access to my inheritance. How much does David need? I asked. It's not about a specific amount. It's about having resources available when family needs help. Translation, she wanted control of everything. That afternoon, I made a phone call I should have made weeks earlier. Williams. Jack, it's Harold Mitchell. Detective Jack Williams and I had worked dozens of financial fraud cases together back when I was with the Bureau. If anyone could help me figure out what Sarah was really up to, it was him. Harold, Jesus, I'm sorry about Margaret. How are you holding up? That's actually why I'm calling. I think someone's trying to run a con on me. I explained everything. Sarah's sudden helpfulness, her intimate knowledge of my finances, the pressure to sign over power of attorney. Jack listened without interrupting. Harold, this sounds like textbook elder financial abuse. Very sophisticated. The gradual isolation, the manufactured urgency, the exploitation of grief. How well do you know this woman? She's been married to David for 3 years, real estate agent here in Denver. But Jack, I haven't actually spoken to David directly in over a month. Silence on the line. Harold, when was the last time you saw David in person? I thought about it. The funeral, March 15th. It was now July 18th. 4 months. This gets worse, Jack said. I want you to start documenting everything. Every conversation, every document she shows you, every claim she makes about David. Can you do that without tipping her off? I think so. Good. And Harold, don't sign anything. No matter what she says, no matter how urgent she makes it sound, nothing. That evening, Sarah came by with dinner. Takeout from Margaret's favorite Italian place. I've been thinking about our conversation, she said, about David's situation. It's actually more serious than I let on. She sat across from me at Margaret's dining table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals over 4 decades. He owes some people money, serious people. They're not the kind to wait patiently for payment. How much money? Enough that he needs access to liquid assets quickly. Your power of attorney would let me transfer funds immediately if something happens. I looked at her carefully. What kind of something? Harold, at your age, medical emergencies happen without warning. Strokes, heart attacks, falls. If you're incapacitated, David's creditors won't wait. She was creating a crisis that didn't exist to justify stealing my life savings, but she had no idea I was about to create a crisis of my own. Sarah, I need to be direct with you. She looked up from her pasta, fork halfway to her mouth. No. Excuse me? I'm not signing any power of attorney. I'm not transferring any funds. And I'm not making any emergency financial decisions based on vague threats about David's debts. The mask slipped. Just for a second, but I caught it. Her expression went from concerned daughter-in-law to something much colder. Harold, I don't think you understand how serious this is. I understand perfectly. You want access to my money. That's not what this is about. Then explain to me exactly what David owes, to whom, and why it requires my intervention. She set down her fork. Some situations are complicated. I spent 30 years investigating complicated financial situations, Sarah. Try me. Another crack in the facade. She didn't know about my background. David had never mentioned what I did for a living. Look, I'm trying to help you. Margaret would have wanted... don't. My voice was quiet, but she stopped talking. Don't you dare tell me what my wife would have wanted. Sarah leaned back in her chair. When she spoke again, her tone was different. Less sympathetic, more impatient. You can't live in this house forever, Harold. You can barely manage your own affairs. Yesterday you couldn't remember where you put your car keys. I remember exactly where I put my car keys. Do you? Because I found them in the refrigerator. That's interesting, Shape. Since I haven't driven anywhere in 3 days. Silence. The point is, she continued, you need help, real help. Not the kind you get from senior centers and church volunteers. Professional management. Professional management of what exactly? Your assets, your property, your future care needs. There it was, professional management of my $4 million. And you've appointed yourself to provide this management? I'm family, Harold. Who else is going to do it? David would do it, I said. David has his own problems? Then let me talk to him. He doesn't want to upset you. I'm his father. I think I can handle whatever he needs to tell me. Sarah stood up abruptly. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Harold. You're not thinking clearly. David is dealing with serious issues, and you want to burden him with your stubbornness? My stubbornness? Yes, your refusal to accept help. Your insistence on living in the past. Your inability to make rational decisions about your future. She was pacing now, her voice getting sharper. Margaret managed everything for you. The bills, the appointments, the decisions. Without her, you're lost. And instead of accepting help from family, you're being paranoid and difficult. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out my phone. Started recording. Tell me more about how I'm being difficult. You're living in a house that's too big for you, with stairs that could kill you, managing finances you don't understand. You're one fall away from a nursing home, and you're too proud to admit it. Go on. This whole conversation is proof that you're not competent to handle your own affairs. A reasonable person would be grateful for help. A reasonable person would trust family to make good decisions. She stopped pacing and looked directly at me. But you're not reasonable anymore, are you, Harold? You're just a confused old man who doesn't know what's best for him. I stopped recording and put the phone back in my pocket. That's an interesting perspective, Sarah. It's not a perspective. It's reality. And in your reality, what happens to confused old men who don't accept help? They end up in state-managed care facilities, with court-appointed guardians managing their assets. I see. And you'd hate for that to happen to me. Of course I would. Because you care about my well-being. Exactly. Not because court-appointed guardians would make it harder for you to access my money. Her face went white. Sarah left without finishing her dinner. Didn't even say goodbye. The next morning I called Jack Williams again. She took the bait, I told him, Mumbo. I've got her on record basically threatening me with guardianship proceedings if I don't cooperate. Harold, that's gold, but we need more. Financial elder abuse cases require evidence of actual theft or fraud, not just intent. Then let's find some. Jack connected me with a private investigator named Tom Turner, former Secret Service, specialized in financial crimes. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Your daughter-in-law is good, Tom said after I briefed him. The gradual approach, the emotional manipulation, the manufactured urgency. This isn't her first time. What do you mean? I mean professional con artists develop patterns. They refine their techniques. If she's this smooth with you, she's probably done this before. Tom explained how we'd build the case. Financial surveillance to track any unauthorized access to my accounts. Background checks on Sarah's previous clients and relationships. Most importantly, verification of David's actual status and whereabouts. About David, Tom said. When you say you haven't spoken to him directly, what exactly does that mean? Sarah always takes the calls. Says he's busy, stressed, doesn't want to worry me. But she gives me updates. What kind of updates? Financial troubles, work pressure, relationship issues, nothing specific. Tom made notes. Harold, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Is it possible that David isn't actually in Miami? What do you mean? I mean physically. Have you seen him, spoken to him directly, or verified his location through any independent source since the funeral? I thought about it. Every conversation had been through Sarah. Every update had come from her. Even David's absence from family calls was explained by her. No, I said slowly. I haven't. Then we need to find your son. Tom's background check on Sarah revealed something interesting. In the past 5 years, she'd been involved with 3 elderly clients who'd experienced financial difficulties shortly after hiring her as their real estate agent. Look at this pattern, Tom said, spreading documents across my dining table. Widowed homeowner, substantial assets, family members, conveniently absent or deceased. In each case, Sarah helped them organize their finances during a vulnerable period. What happened to them? 2 ended up in managed care facilities after signing over power of attorney. The third died before his family discovered that $400,000 was missing from his accounts. My forensic accounting background kicked in. Where did the money go? Shell companies, fake investment schemes, real estate transactions that never actually happened. Very sophisticated. But the real bombshell came when Tom started tracking David's location. Harold, I need you to sit down for this. He pulled out his laptop and showed me a series of photographs. David, very much alive, sitting on a beach. The metadata showed they were taken in Nassau, Bahamas, yesterday. He's not in Miami. He's been in the Bahamas for the past 6 weeks. Hotel registration under a false name, but facial recognition software confirmed it's him. The Bahamas? Gets better. He's not alone. Tom clicked to the next photo. David with a young blonde woman I'd never seen before. They were holding hands, laughing, clearly a couple. Her name is Jessica Parks, 26 years old, originally from Phoenix. No criminal record, but get this. She's been posting about her vacation romance all over social media. Vacation romance? She has no idea David is married. According to her Instagram, she met him 3 months ago. He told her he was single. That's just going through a divorce. I stared at the photos. My son was alive, living in paradise with his girlfriend, while his wife was back in Denver, trying to steal my inheritance. Tom, I don't think David knows what Sarah is doing. That night, Sarah called me. Harold, I've been thinking about our conversation. I may have been too direct. It's fine, Sarah. No, it's not. I care about you, and I want what's best for this family. Sometimes that means having difficult conversations. I had Tom's recording equipment set up by then. Every call was being documented. I understand. Good, because I have some news about David's situation. It's gotten worse. How much worse? He needs $50,000 immediately. Tonight. $50,000? For what? I can't get into details over the phone, but Harold, if we don't act fast, there could be serious consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind that could affect our whole family. Your reputation, your safety, David's future. She was escalating the urgency, creating a false emergency to pressure me into immediate action. Sarah, I'll need to see documentation, bank statements, loan agreements, something official. There's no time for documentation. These people don't work with paperwork. What people? Silence on the line. She'd revealed more than she intended. Look, can you access your Wells Fargo account online? Yes. Good. I'm going to walk you through a wire transfer. It needs to happen tonight. To who? I'll give you the account information. Just trust me on this. I was recording everything. Tom was sitting across from me making notes. Sarah, I'm not transferring money to anyone without understanding exactly what this is for. Harold? Do you want something terrible to happen to David? Of course not. Then help me help him. The interesting thing about con artists is that they always overplay their hand. Sarah was about to make the biggest mistake of her criminal career. I need access to your accounts, Harold. All of them. The next morning, I got a call that changed everything. Dad? David's voice. Finally, David, where are you? Sarah said you were dealing with some serious problems. What problems? Dad, I'm fine. I'm in Nassau on vacation. I've been trying to call you for weeks, but Sarah said you were having health issues and didn't want to be disturbed. My blood went cold. Health issues? She said you'd had some kind of episode. Memory problems? Confusion? She thought it was best if I gave you space to recover. David, I haven't had any health issues. Silence on the line. Dad, what's going on? I explained everything. Sarah's pressure tactics, the power of attorney demands, her claims about his financial troubles. David listened without interrupting. Dad, I don't have any debts. I don't owe anyone money, and I definitely haven't asked Sarah to handle anything for me. Where exactly are you? Atlantis Resort. I met someone here, a woman named Jessica. We've been dating for a few months. I was planning to bring her home to meet you. David, Sarah thinks you're in Miami. I haven't been to Miami in over a year. And she doesn't know about Jessica? No, Sarah and we've been having problems. I came here to think about our marriage. Jessica doesn't even know I'm married. The pieces were falling into place. Sarah thought David was missing or dead. She was positioning herself to inherit everything as his widow, but David was very much alive, just temporarily out of communication. Dad, what has Sarah been telling people about me? I thought about her recent escalation, the urgent demands for money, her increased pressure for power of attorney. David, I think Sarah is planning to fake your death. 3 days later, Sarah proved me right. I was having coffee on my front porch when she pulled into my driveway. She looked different. Dress black, makeup subdued, expression appropriately somber. She walked up my front steps like she was approaching a gallows. Harold, I have terrible news. What kind of news? It's about David. She sat down heavily in Margaret's old rocking chair. There's been an accident. I set down my coffee cup. What kind of accident? A car crash in Miami. He didn't survive. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. A death certificate. David Mitchell, age 35, cause of death, multiple trauma from vehicle collision. It looked official. It wasn't. When did this happen? Yesterday morning. I've been handling the arrangements. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I didn't want to tell you over the phone. Have you contacted the authorities? Everything's been taken care of. The body has been prepared. I've arranged for cremation. Cremation? David always said he wanted to be cremated, like Margaret. That was a lie. David was terrified of fire. Always had been since childhood. Sarah, I'd like to see the police report. Of course, I'll get you copies of everything, but Harold, there are immediate concerns we need to address. Such as? David had debts, significant debts. His creditors won't wait for probate. We need to protect your assets before they try to make claims against the estate. She pulled out another document. The same power of attorney I'd refused to sign, with updated language about emergency estate protection. This will allow me to secure your finances immediately, transfer funds to protected accounts, pay off David's obligations, make sure his creditors can't touch your inheritance. By now, several neighbors had noticed Sarah's car in my driveway. Mrs. Patterson from next door was watering her garden, but clearly listening. The Johnsons were getting their mail, but taking their time about it. Small town life, everyone knew everyone else's business. Harold, we need to move quickly on this. Word spread fast in our neighborhood. By afternoon, my doorbell was ringing constantly. Neighbors bringing casseroles, offering condolences, asking if there was anything they could do. Sarah played her part perfectly. Thank you so much for coming, she told Mrs. Patterson. Harold is taking this very hard. David was his only child. Such a tragedy, Mrs. Patterson replied. And so young. Was it sudden? Very sudden. A car accident in Miami. He was there on business. I watched Sarah weave her lies with impressive skill. David's fictional business trip, the tragic phone calls she'd received, her immediate flight to Miami to handle arrangements, her concern for my emotional state. Harold's been struggling since Margaret passed, she told the Johnson family. This might be more than he can handle. The sympathy was overwhelming. Our neighbor Bob Wilson offered to help with funeral arrangements. Susan Chen brought groceries. Everyone wanted to support the grieving father and his devoted daughter-in-law. By evening, Sarah had set up a GoFundMe page. Memorial Fund for David Mitchell, the headline read, helping family cover unexpected funeral expenses and support his grieving father. The description was masterful. David's sudden death, my fixed income, the financial burden of funeral costs on top of Margaret's recent medical bills. Sarah positioned herself as the responsible family member, trying to protect me from additional stress. The donations started immediately. $100 from the Pattersons, $250 from David's old high school friends, $500 from my former colleagues at the FBI field office. Within 6 hours, the fund had raised over $8,000. Sarah showed me the page on her phone. People are so generous. This will really help with the expenses. What expenses? The funeral home, the cremation, the memorial service. It all adds up quickly. How much does cremation cost? About $3,000. But there are other costs. Transportation, permits, the memorial service. She was planning an entire funeral for my living son, collecting donations from our community, and positioning herself as the grieving widow managing everything. The audacity was breathtaking. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday at St. Mark's Episcopal Church. Sarah had arranged everything: flowers, music, reception afterward at the church hall. She'd even written the obituary. David Mitchell, beloved son and husband, passed away unexpectedly on August 15th in Miami, Florida. David was a devoted family man who brought joy and laughter to everyone who knew him. It ran in the Denver Post and online. David's high school friends were sharing it on Facebook. His former co-workers were posting memories. My son was being mourned by hundreds of people, and he was sitting on a beach in Nassau, completely unaware that he was dead. Friday night, Sarah came to my house with boxes. "We need to pack up David's things," she said. "I can't bear to see them anymore." She started in his old bedroom, pulling clothes from the closet, clearing out his desk, moving like a woman trying to erase memories too painful to bear. "There's something else we need to discuss," she said, folding one of David's old college t-shirts. "What's that?" "This house. It's too much for you now, especially with everything that's happened." She sat down on David's bed, still holding the shirt. "I've been looking at some really nice senior communities, places where you'd have help when you need it, but still maintain your independence." "I'm not interested in moving." "Harold, you can't live in the past forever. Margaret's gone. David's gone. This house is just a reminder of everything you've lost." She stood up and walked to David's window, looking out at the backyard where he'd played as a child. "I know this is hard to hear, but holding on to this place isn't healthy. You need to start fresh somewhere new." "And what happens to the house?" "We sell it. Use the equity for your care expenses." "We? I'm family, Harold. I'm all you have left now." She turned from the window and looked at me directly. "The funeral is tomorrow. After we lay David to rest, we need to focus on your future. And your future can't be in this house full of ghosts." Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that Margaret always loved. I put on my best black suit and drove to St. Mark's. The church was packed. Hundreds of people had come to mourn my living son. Sarah stood at the front greeting mourners, accepting condolences, playing the devoted widow with Oscar-worthy performance. She'd even brought tissues and makeup to touch up the tears. At 10:30, she approached the pulpit to deliver her eulogy. "David was the kind of man who put family first," she began. "He worried about his father, especially after losing his mother. David's greatest fear was that Harold would be left alone without family support." Ironic words from a woman planning to steal everything I owned. That's when I saw Jack Williams enter through the side door. He wasn't alone. Tom Turner followed him, along with another man I didn't recognize wearing a badge. Sarah continued her eulogy, unaware that her audience had changed. "David would want us to take care of each other," she said, "to support Harold during this difficult transition." Jack walked down the center aisle and stopped directly in front of the pulpit. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Sarah looked up, confused by the interruption. "I'm Detective Williams with the Denver Police Financial Crimes Unit. I need to speak with you." The church went silent, 300 people holding their breath. "I'm in the middle of a funeral," Sarah said. "Yes, I can see that. A funeral for David Mitchell, who, according to this death certificate, died in a car accident in Miami on August 15th. Jack held up the forged document. "The problem is, Mrs. Mitchell, David Mitchell is very much alive." He pulled out his phone and connected it to the church's sound system. "Dad, can you hear me?" David's voice filled the church. Clear, healthy, very much not dead. "Hi, everyone. I'm calling from Nassau, where I've been on vacation for the past 6 weeks. I just want to confirm that reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated." The congregation erupted. Gasps, shouting, confusion. Someone was recording with their phone. Sarah stood frozen at the pulpit, her face white as her dress. "Mrs. Mitchell," Jack continued, You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse. The chaos in the church was unlike anything I'd ever seen. People were standing, shouting questions, pulling out phones to record. Some were demanding explanations, others were calling friends who'd donated to the GoFundMe. Sarah tried to run. She made it 3 steps before Tom Turner blocked her path. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, you have the right to remain silent, Jack began, but Sarah wasn't staying silent. This is a misunderstanding, she shouted over the crowd noise. David is confused. He's been having psychological problems. That's when David's video call came through on the church's projection screen. He was sitting on a hotel balcony, palm trees visible behind him. Jessica Parks next to him in a bikini. Psychological problems? David laughed. Sarah, I've never felt better in my life. The crowd turned their attention to the screen. David looked healthy, tanned, waxed. Nothing like someone who'd died in a car accident. Dad, are you okay? This woman told me you were having memory issues and couldn't handle phone calls. I'm fine, son. Better than fine. And who, David continued, looking directly at Sarah through the camera, is going to explain why my wife is holding my funeral while I'm sitting in the Bahamas? Jessica leaned into the frame. Wait, wife? David, you told me you were divorced. Even through the video call, you could see David's face change as he realized the scope of Sarah's deception. Sarah, David's voice was deadly quiet now. What exactly have you been telling people? Sarah was handcuffed, but still trying to maintain control. David, you don't understand the situation. Your father needed help. He was being taken advantage of. By who? Financial advisors, estate lawyers, people trying to exploit his grief. Tom Turner stepped forward with a folder full of evidence. Mrs. Mitchell, we have recordings of you threatening Mr. Harold Mitchell with guardianship proceedings if he didn't sign over power of attorney. We have forged documents, fake death certificates, and evidence of attempted wire fraud. He turned to address the congregation. We also have evidence that Mrs. Mitchell has run similar schemes on at least 3 other elderly victims in the Denver area. The crowd's murmur turned angry. These people had been played, their sympathy exploited, their donations stolen. David, I called out to the screen, come home, son, we have a lot to talk about. What happened next was like watching a controlled demolition. Sarah's entire life collapsed in real time. Tom Turner opened his evidence folder and began reading from his investigation report. Financial records show unauthorized access to Harold Mitchell's accounts dating back to April 2024. Forged power of attorney documents. Fake death certificate with a falsified medical examiner's signature. He held up bank statements showing attempted wire transfers that had been blocked by fraud detection systems. Mrs. Mitchell attempted to transfer $50,000 from Harold Mitchell's Wells Fargo account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands on August 14th, one day before the alleged date of death. The crowd was getting angry. These were the same people who donated their hard-earned money to the GoFundMe campaign. The GoFundMe fraud alone constitutes theft of $15,847 from 127 different victims, Tom continued. Mrs. Patterson stood up from her pew. I gave you $100. I skipped groceries this week to donate to that fund. Bob Wilson was even more upset. You told me David owed money to dangerous people. I gave you $500. Sarah tried one last desperate play. You don't understand, she shouted. Harold is mentally incompetent. He was going to lose everything to scammers. I was trying to protect his assets. Jack Williams pulled out his phone and played the recording from our dinner conversation. Sarah's voice filled the church. You're just a confused old man who doesn't know what's best for him. Then her threat. Confused old men end up in state-managed care facilities with court-appointed guardians managing their assets. The evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses in the pews were recording everything with their phones. Within hours, the footage would be viral on social media. Tom Turner delivered the final blow. Mrs. Mitchell's real estate license has been suspended pending investigation. We've identified irregularities in her handling of at least 6 elderly clients' property transactions over the past 3 years. Her career was over. Her freedom was over. Her marriage was over. As Jack escorted her toward the church exit, Sarah made one final attempt to save face. Harold, you'll never survive on your own. Without family support, you'll end up exactly where I said you would. I stood up from my pew and looked her directly in the eye. Sarah, I survived 30 years investigating people like you. I think I can handle retirement. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Sarah was charged with multiple felonies: elder financial abuse, wire fraud, forgery, identity theft, and theft by deception. The district attorney called it one of the most sophisticated elder abuse schemes they'd prosecuted. Her bail was set at $100,000, which she couldn't make. Turns out most of her assets were tied up in fraudulent investments and shell companies. Within a week, the bank had reversed all unauthorized transactions and secured my accounts with additional fraud protection. The GoFundMe platform refunded every donation and launched their own investigation into Sarah's campaign. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit took over the case when they discovered Sarah's activities crossed state lines. She'd been running similar schemes in Arizona and Nevada before moving to Colorado. David flew home from Nassau the day after the funeral fiasco. Jessica came with him, still processing the fact that she'd been dating a married man whose wife had faked his death. "Dad, I'm so sorry," David said when I picked them up at the airport. "I had no idea Sarah was capable of something like this." "How could you know? She fooled everyone." "I should have stayed in touch better. After Mom died, I was dealing with my own grief. I thought giving you space was the right thing to do." That's exactly what Sarah was counting on. The divorce papers were filed within 48 hours. David's lawyer made it clear that Sarah would receive nothing from the marriage. In fact, given the criminal charges, David was pursuing civil restitution for damages to his reputation and emotional distress. My insurance company launched their own investigation and determined that if Sarah's scheme had succeeded, they would have been defrauded of Margaret's $250,000 life insurance benefit. The ripple effects kept expanding. Other elderly victims in Sarah's real estate network came forward. The state licensing board opened a comprehensive review of her past transactions. By Christmas, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell would be serving a 5-year federal sentence for elder fraud. The professional fallout was swift and complete. Within 72 hours of her arrest, the Colorado Real Estate Commission suspended Sarah's license pending investigation. When they dug into her client files, they found a pattern of exploitation targeting elderly sellers. She would identify vulnerable homeowners, the commission's investigator explained to me, recent widows of people with health issues, families in crisis. Then she'd offer to help with more than just the real estate transaction. The scheme was always the same: gain the client's trust during a vulnerable period, offer to help with financial organization, gradually assume more control over their affairs, eventually pressure them into disadvantageous deals or outright theft. 3 other victims came forward during the investigation. Margaret Wilson, 73, had signed over power of attorney to Sarah after her husband's stroke. Sarah had sold Margaret's house for $200,000 below market value to a company she secretly owned. Robert Chen, 81, had been convinced to invest his retirement savings in an exclusive real estate fund that turned out to be Sarah's personal account. Dorothy Martinez, 69, had hired Sarah to sell her late husband's business property. Sarah had kept the $400,000 commission and told Dorothy the sale had fallen through. The total amount stolen across all victims exceeded $1.2 million. The state attorney general's office created a task force specifically to investigate financial elder abuse in real estate transactions. Sarah's case became their flagship prosecution. Her former real estate agency, Premier Properties Denver, faced civil lawsuits from multiple victims. They settled out of court for undisclosed amounts and implemented new oversight procedures for agents working with elderly clients. The ripple effects reached the local banking community. Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and other major institutions updated their fraud detection systems specifically to flag suspicious activity involving elderly account holders. Sarah's case was featured in training materials for bank employees, real estate professionals, and elder care advocates. Her name became synonymous with financial elder abuse in Colorado. She would never work in real estate again. The hardest part wasn't the legal proceedings or the media attention, it was the apology tour. As part of her plea agreement, Sarah was required to make public restitution to the community she'd defrauded. The judge ordered her to appear at a town hall meeting and explain her actions to her victims. St. Mark's Episcopal Church hosted the meeting. The same sanctuary where she'd held David's fake funeral was packed again, but this time with a very different energy. Sarah, wearing an orange county jail jumpsuit and handcuffs, read from a prepared statement. I want to apologize to Harold Mitchell and the entire community for my actions. I exploited your kindness and trust during a time when you were trying to help a grieving family. Her voice was flat, emotionless, court-mandated remorse. I also want to apologize to David Mitchell for the damage I've caused to his reputation and relationships. David sat in the front row next to me. He'd insisted on being there, even though his lawyer had advised against it. My actions were inexcusable, Sarah continued. I betrayed the trust of people who welcomed me into their community and treated me like family. Mrs. Patterson stood up from her pew. How many other families have you done this to? Sarah's lawyer whispered something in her ear. I cannot comment on ongoing investigations, Bob Wilson shouted from the back of the church. That's not an answer! The judge had allowed victims to address Sarah directly. One by one, they stood up and told her how her actions had affected them. Margaret Wilson talked about losing her home because of Sarah's manipulation. Robert Chen described the stress of discovering his life savings were gone. Dorothy Martinez explained how Sarah's theft had forced her to move in with her children. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and looked directly at Sarah. You picked the wrong family to destroy, and you underestimated the wrong man. But most importantly, you forgot that justice isn't revenge. It's protection. Sarah was sentenced on a cold February morning 6 months after her arrest. Judge Patricia Morrison didn't mince words. Mrs. Mitchell, you systematically exploited some of our community's most vulnerable members during their darkest hours. You weaponized their grief, their trust, and their generosity for personal gain. The sentence was comprehensive. 5 years in federal prison, $500,000 in restitution to victims, and lifetime prohibition from working in financial services or real estate. But the judge wasn't finished. Your actions have damaged far more than bank accounts. You've eroded trust between families and communities. You've made grieving people question their own judgment and their safety in their own homes. Sarah showed no emotion as the sentence was read. No tears, no apologies, no acknowledgement of the lives she'd destroyed. After the sentencing, David and I drove home together. Jessica had moved to Denver and was living with him in a small apartment downtown. They were planning to marry in the spring. Dad, do you think she'll actually serve the full 5 years? Probably 4 with good behavior. But Tom Turner says the civil lawsuits will keep her tied up in court for years. After that, the restitution alone would bankrupt her. Margaret Wilson's family was suing for the difference between the price Sarah sold her house for and its actual market value. Robert Chen's children were pursuing a wrongful conversion claim. Dorothy Martinez had hired a lawyer to recover her husband's business property. The thing is, I told David, the money was never really the point. What do you mean? Sarah thought she was stealing from a confused old man who wouldn't fight back. She thought grief made me weak. I pulled into my driveway, the same driveway where Sarah had once told me I had 3 days to get out. But grief doesn't make you weak, son. It makes you careful about who deserves your trust. The impact on our community was lasting. St. Mark's Church now required background checks for anyone handling financial donations. The local police department created an elder fraud prevention program. The city council passed an ordinance requiring additional oversight for real estate transactions involving elderly sellers. Sarah's case had made everyone more vigilant, more protective of vulnerable community members. 3 months after her sentencing, I received a letter from her in prison. I threw it away without opening it. The systemic changes that followed Sarah's case were more extensive than anyone expected. The Colorado legislature passed the Margaret Mitchell Elder Protection Act, named after my late wife, which created new criminal penalties for financial exploitation of vulnerable adults and required mandatory reporting by financial institutions. Banks throughout the state implemented new protocols. Transactions over $10,000 involving accounts held by people over 65 now required additional verification. Sudden changes in banking patterns triggered automatic reviews. Power of attorney documents required notarization and independent witness verification. Wells Fargo, where Sarah had attempted her wire transfer, created a dedicated elder fraud prevention unit. They hired Tom Turner as a consultant to train their staff on recognizing exploitation patterns. The real estate industry faced its own reckoning. The Colorado Association of Realtors mandated annual training on elder fraud prevention. They created a hotline for reporting suspicious activity and established a victim assistance fund. St. Mark's Church completely overhauled their financial procedures. All donation campaigns now required documentation of actual need. GoFundMe and similar platforms were prohibited unless verified by church leadership. They created a volunteer committee to visit elderly parishioners regularly. The most significant change was the creation of the Denver Elder Justice Coalition, a partnership between law enforcement, social services, healthcare providers, and financial institutions. Their mission was early detection and prevention of elder abuse. I found myself at the center of these efforts. Detective Williams recruited me as a volunteer consultant for financial crimes investigations. My forensic accounting background and personal experience with Sarah's tactics made me valuable for training other investigators. "Harold, you've got credibility that we can't manufacture," Jack told me. "When you tell people to trust their instincts about financial exploitation, they listen." I started speaking at senior centers, church groups, and community meetings. The message was always the same. Vulnerability doesn't equal helplessness, and asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. The Denver Post ran a series of articles about elder fraud prevention, featuring my story as the lead example. The headline read, "Retired FBI Accountant Outsmarts Daughter-in-Law's $2.3 million inheritance scam." But the most meaningful change was personal. David moved back to Denver permanently. He and Jessica bought a house 3 blocks from mine. We had dinner together every Sunday, and I finally felt like I had family again. Real family. The kind that protects you instead of exploiting you. A year after Sarah's arrest, David and Jessica were married in the same church where she'd held his fake funeral. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the congregation. Pastor Williams, no relation to Detective Williams, opened the ceremony with a reflection on truth, trust, and the importance of protecting family bonds. Today we celebrate not just the union of David and Jessica, but the triumph of love over deception, trust over manipulation, and family over fraud. Margaret would have loved Jessica. She was studying to become a financial planner, inspired by what had happened to our family. "I want to help people protect themselves," she told me. "What Sarah did to you could happen to anyone." David had changed too. The carefree attitude that had made him vulnerable to Sarah's lies was replaced by a more thoughtful approach to relationships and responsibilities. "Dad, I'm sorry I wasn't here when you needed me most." "You were here when it mattered, son. But I should have been here from the beginning." Margaret always said that perfect timing is a luxury we rarely get. What matters is showing up when you realize what's important. We'd established new boundaries and new traditions. David called me every Tuesday and Friday, not because he had to, but because we both wanted to maintain connection. He handled my technology issues. I helped him understand investments and retirement planning. Jessica fit into our family seamlessly. She had the same practical intelligence that Margaret had possessed, and the same fierce protectiveness toward people she loved. "Harold," she said at their wedding reception, "I want you to know that what happened with Sarah will never happen again. David and I will make sure of that." "I know you will, Jessica. But more than that, we want you to know that you're not alone anymore. Family means looking out for each other." Standing there at the reception, watching David and Jessica dance to the same song Margaret and I had danced to 44 years earlier, I realized something important. Sarah had tried to isolate me to make me vulnerable. Instead, she'd brought me closer to the family I really had. 2 years later, I'm still living in the same house where Sarah once told me I had 3 days to get out. But everything else has changed. The house is full of life again. David and Jessica visit twice a week. Their first child, my granddaughter, Margaret Elizabeth, was born last spring. She's already showing signs of her great-grandmother's stubborn intelligence. I've become an advocate for elder fraud prevention, working with law enforcement agencies and senior organizations across Colorado. The work gives me purpose and helps other families avoid what we went through. Last month, I helped expose another inheritance fraud scheme targeting a widower in Colorado Springs. The patterns were identical to Sarah's approach. Manufactured urgency, emotional manipulation, isolation from family support. The difference was that this time, we caught it before any money was stolen. That's the message I want to leave you with. Sarah's scheme worked initially because I was isolated in my grief. I wasn't talking to my son, wasn't connected to my community, wasn't trusting my own instincts. But isolation is a choice, not an inevitability. If you're watching this because you've experienced family financial betrayal, or because you're worried about an elderly parent or relative, here's what I've learned. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. If someone is pressuring you to make urgent financial decisions during a vulnerable time, slow down and get independent advice. Document everything. Keep records of conversations, save emails, note dates, and times. If someone is exploiting you, evidence will be your best protection. Stay connected. The strongest defense against financial predators is family and community support. Don't let anyone convince you that you're better off isolated. Most importantly, remember that age and grief don't make you weak. They make you wise enough to know the difference between people who want to help you and people who want to help themselves to your assets. If you've experienced something similar to my story, share it in the comments below. Your experience might help protect someone else's family. And if you found this story helpful, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the best way to honor the people we've lost is to protect the people we still have.